In a small, quiet village surrounded by dense woods and rolling hills, there lived a man named Thomas Grayson. Thomas wasn't like most people in the village. While others spent their days farming, fishing, or tending to livestock, Thomas preferred solitude. He had always been fascinated by old things, antiques, relics, artifacts that held stories of times long past. His modest home was filled with shelves crammed with dusty books, rusted tools, faded paintings, and odd trinkets he'd collected over the years. One chilly autumn morning, as golden leaves swirled through the air and the scent of damp earth lingered, everywhere Thomas decided to explore an abandoned estate on the outskirts of the village. The estate had once belonged to a wealthy family, but it had fallen into disrepair decades ago after its owners mysteriously vanished. No one dared go near it anymore. Locals whispered about curses and ghosts haunting the crumbling mansion. But Thomas didn't believe in such superstitions. To him, the place was just another treasure trove waiting to be discovered. Armed with a lantern and a sturdy satchel, Thomas set off early, his boots crunching against the frost-covered ground. As he approached the estate, the towering iron gates groaned under the weight of time, vines twisting around them like skeletal fingers. Pushing the gates open with some effort, Thomas stepped inside. The overgrown garden stretched out before him, wild and untamed, with thorny bushes clawing at his coat. Broken statues stood among the weeds, their faces weathered and unrecognizable. It felt eerie, yet strangely beautiful, as though nature itself had reclaimed what humans had left behind. The house loomed ahead, its windows dark and empty like hollow eyes staring back at him. The front door hung slightly ajar, creaking softly in the wind. Taking a deep breath, Thomas pushed it open further and stepped inside. The interior was dimly lit, the only light filtering through cracks in the boarded-up windows. Dust motes floated lazily in the air and the floorboards groaned beneath his weight. Every step echoed through the silent halls, making him feel like an intruder in a forgotten world. Thomas wandered from room to room, his lantern casting flickering shadows on the walls. Most of the furniture was either broken or covered in thick layers of dust, but here and there, he found items worth salvaging. A cracked porcelain vase, a tarnished silver locket, a stack of yellowed letters tied with brittle ribbon. Each object seemed to whisper secrets of the past, urging him to uncover their stories. It was in the library, a vast shadowy chamber lined with rotting bookshelves, that Thomas made his most intriguing discovery. In the far corner of the room, partially hidden beneath a pile of debris, sat a wooden box unlike anything he'd ever seen. At first glance, it appeared ordinary enough, but as he knelt down to examine it more closely, he realized it was anything but. The box was about 2 feet long and a foot wide, crafted from dark polished wood that gleamed faintly despite the layer of grime covering it. Its surface was adorned with intricate carvings, swirling patterns, strange symbols, and tiny figures that seemed almost lifelike. Some of the designs resembled trees with twisting branches, while others looked like celestial bodies orbiting each other. There was something mesmerizing about the way the carvings caught the light, shimmering subtly as though alive. Curiosity burned within Thomas. Who had made this box? What purpose did it serve? And why had it been left behind in this desolate place? He ran his fingers along the edges, feeling the smoothness of the wood and the ridges of the carvings. The lid was sealed shut, locked with an ornate metal clasp that showed signs of age, but still held firm. Despite its apparent sturdiness, the box was surprisingly heavy, as if it contained something substantial inside. Unable to resist the allure of the mysterious artifact, Thomas carefully lifted it and carried it back to his workshop. On the way home, his mind raced with possibilities. Was the box a relic from some ancient civilization? Did it hold valuable treasures or forbidden knowledge? Or was it simply a decorative piece, meant to impress rather than intrigue? Whatever the truth might be, Thomas knew one thing for certain: he had to open it. Back in his cluttered workshop, Thomas placed the box on his workbench and began examining it more thoroughly. He wiped away the dirt and grime, revealing the full extent of its craftsmanship. The carvings were even more detailed than he'd initially thought, each line precise and deliberate. Some of the symbols reminded him of constellations he'd studied in astronomy books, while others bore no resemblance to anything he'd ever seen. The lock posed a challenge. It was old and stubborn, refusing to budge no matter how much force Thomas applied. Determined not to damage the box, he rummaged through his collection of tools, searching for something that might help. After several failed attempts, he finally located a small, delicate pick designed for unlocking antique mechanisms. With steady hands and unwavering patience, Thomas worked the pick into the lock, listening intently for the telltale click that would signal success. Hours passed and frustration mounted. Just when Thomas was about to give up, the lock suddenly gave way with a soft snap. The lid loosened, and Thomas froze, his heart pounding in anticipation. Slowly, almost reverently, he lifted the lid and peered inside. For a moment he couldn't process what he saw. Nestled within the box, wrapped in layers of silken fabric, was a young woman. She lay perfectly still, her body curled into a fetal position, her face peaceful as though she were merely sleeping. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, and her hair cascaded around her like strands of silver thread. She wore a dress made of material so fine it seemed otherworldly, shimmering faintly in the lamplight. Thomas stared in stunned silence, his mind struggling to comprehend how or why a living person could be inside a sealed wooden box. For a few moments he wondered if he was hallucinating. Perhaps the stress of the day had gotten to him, or maybe the box contained some kind of elaborate illusion. But as he reached out tentatively to touch her hand, he felt warmth beneath his fingertips. This was no trickery. This was real. And then, as if sensing his presence, the young woman stirred. Her eyelids fluttered open, revealing irises that glowed, faintly, like moonlight reflected on water. She blinked slowly, taking in her surroundings, her gaze eventually settling on Thomas. Her expression shifted from confusion to recognition, and then to gratitude. Without saying a word, she sat up, her movements graceful yet cautious, as though she hadn't moved in a very long time. Thomas took a step back, unsure of what to do or say. His mind raced with questions, but all he could manage was a single, breathless sentence. Who are you?" The young woman smiled faintly, her voice soft and melodic when she finally spoke. "My name is Lyra," she said, "and I've been waiting a very long time to meet someone like you." With those words, Thomas's life, and perhaps the entire world, was forever changed. Thomas stood frozen, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. The young woman, Lyra, sat upright in the wooden box, her silver hair cascading over her shoulders like a shimmering veil. Her eyes, glowing faintly with an otherworldly light, seemed to pierce through him, as if she could see into the depths of his soul. She didn't appear frightened or confused, despite waking up in a stranger's workshop after being sealed inside a mysterious box. Instead, there was a calmness about her, a quiet confidence that made Thomas feel both intrigued and uneasy. Lyra glanced around the room, taking in the cluttered shelves filled with dusty books and peculiar objects. Her gaze lingered on the flickering lantern beside her before returning to Thomas. "I've waited centuries for this moment," she said softly, her voice melodic yet tinged with sadness. "But I never imagined it would happen here, or with someone like you." "Waited?" Thomas stammered, finally finding his voice. "What do you mean? Who are you, and how were you inside that box?" Lyra smiled faintly, as though she understood his confusion but wasn't surprised by it. "My story is not an easy one to tell," she began, her tone gentle but firm. "But I will try to explain. My name is Lyra, and I come from a time long before yours, a time when magic thrived alongside humanity, and the boundaries between worlds were thin and fragile." Thomas blinked, unsure whether to believe her. Magic? Other worlds? It sounded like something out of a fairy tale, not real life. But then again, how else could he explain what he had just witnessed? Shaking his head slightly, he gestured for her to continue. "Go on. he said cautiously. Tell me everything. Lyra nodded, folding her hands in her lap as though gathering her thoughts. Centuries ago, she began, there existed a secret society known as the Keepers. They were guardians of balance, responsible for maintaining harmony between the realms of humans, nature, and spirits. Among their ranks were individuals, gifted with extraordinary powers, abilities tied to the elements themselves. I was one such person. She paused, looking down at her hands as if remembering something painful. But my gifts came with a price. While I could heal wounds, revive dying plants, and even summon storms, using these powers drained me physically and emotionally. Over time, I grew weaker, until I could barely stand on my own. The Keepers feared that others would seek to exploit my abilities for selfish purposes, so they devised a way to protect me and the world. They placed me inside that box, she continued, her voice trembling slightly. It was enchanted, a prison meant to preserve my life while shielding me from those who might misuse my powers. For centuries I slept, unaware of the passage of time, until now. Thomas listened intently, his skepticism warring with a growing sense of wonder. Everything Lyra said sounded impossible, yet the evidence was sitting right in front of him. If she truly possessed magical abilities, why hadn't she escaped the box herself? Why rely on someone like him to set her free? As if reading his thoughts, Lyra added, the enchantment on the box required someone pure of heart to open it, someone whose intentions aligned with mine, to restore balance rather than disrupt it. That's why you found me, Thomas. You were chosen, whether you realize it or not. Her words sent a shiver down his spine. Chosen? Him? He was just an ordinary man with a passion for collecting old things. What possible role could he play in her extraordinary story? Before Thomas could respond, Lyra shifted slightly, stretching, her arms and legs as though testing their strength. It feels strange, she admitted, glancing at her hands. Being awake again. The air smells different, heavier somehow. And this place... She gestured vaguely at the workshop. It's unlike anything I've ever seen. Thomas chuckled nervously. Well, welcome to the modern world, he said, trying to lighten the mood. Things have changed quite a bit since your time. Lyra tilted her head curiously. Modern world, how much time has passed? A lot, Thomas replied. Hundreds of years, maybe more. Cars, electricity, phones. It's all new compared to what you're used to. Her eyes widened with fascination. Show me, she urged. Please, I want to understand. Reluctantly, Thomas agreed. He helped Lyra out of the box, steadying her as she took her first steps in centuries. She moved gracefully but hesitantly, as though relearning how to walk. Once she regained her footing, he led her outside, where the crisp autumn air greeted them. Lyra gasped in awe at the sight of the village, its rooftops glistening under the fading sunlight. Children played in the streets, dogs barked in the distance, and smoke curled lazily from chimneys. This is incredible, Lyra murmured, her eyes sparkling with wonder. So many people, so much life. But as they walked further, Lyra's expression shifted from amazement to unease. She noticed the lack of trees, the absence of birdsong, and the unnatural hum of machinery. Something feels wrong, she said quietly. The earth is suffering. I can feel it. Thomas frowned. Suffering? What do you mean? The connection between humans and nature has weakened, Lyra explained. In my time, we respected the land, nurtured it, gave back what we took. Now it seems you've forgotten that bond. The imbalance worries me. Her words struck a chord within Thomas. He'd always loved nature, but he hadn't paid much attention to the environmental issues plaguing the world. To hear Lyra speak so passionately about it made him see things differently. By the time they returned to the workshop, night had fallen, blanketing the village in darkness. Inside, Lyra sat cross-legged on the floor, examining the various objects scattered around the room. She picked up a rusted key, turning it over in her hands. These items hold memories, she said thoughtfully. Stories of those who owned them. Do you listen to them, Thomas? He shook his head. Not really. I just collect them because they're old and interesting. Lyra smiled knowingly. Perhaps it's time you started listening. Every object carries a piece of history, a fragment of truth. Together, they form a tapestry of knowledge, one that may help us understand what lies ahead. Her cryptic remark left Thomas pondering. What exactly did she mean by what lies ahead? Was she hinting at some greater purpose, some mission they needed to undertake together? Before he could ask, Lyra yawned, exhaustion creeping into her features. You should rest, Thomas suggested, gesturing toward a makeshift bed he'd prepared earlier. You've been through a lot today. Lyra nodded gratefully. Thank you, Thomas, she said, lying down. For everything. As she drifted off to sleep, Thomas couldn't shake the feeling that his life had irrevocably changed. This enigmatic woman from another time had entered his world, bringing with her secrets and mysteries far beyond his comprehension. Whatever lay ahead, he knew one thing for certain. He couldn't turn away now. With a sigh, Thomas settled into a chair nearby, watching over Lyra as she slept. The flickering lantern cast dancing shadows on the walls, creating an almost dreamlike atmosphere. For the first time in years, Thomas felt a spark of excitement, a sense of purpose he hadn't known he was missing. Little did he realize that this was only the beginning of a journey that would challenge everything he believed in and force him to confront the boundaries of reality itself. The next morning, Thomas woke to find Lyra already up and exploring the workshop. She moved with a quiet grace, her fingers brushing against the objects on his shelves as though she were reading their stories. The sunlight streaming through the window caught the silver strands of her hair, making her look almost ethereal. For a moment, Thomas simply watched her, marveling at how seamlessly she seemed to blend into his cluttered little world, despite coming from an entirely different time. Lyra turned to him and smiled, her glowing eyes reflecting curiosity. You have so many treasures here, she said, holding up a small brass compass. Each one holds fragments of memories, whispers of those who once owned them. Thomas rubbed the back of his neck awkwardly. I guess I never thought about it like that. To me, they're just old things. Nothing is just anything, Lyra replied gently. Everything has meaning, even if we don't see it right away. These items are more than relics, they're pieces of history waiting to be understood. Her words lingered in the air, planting a seed of thought in Thomas's mind. He had always collected antiques because they fascinated him, but he'd never considered the deeper significance behind them. Maybe Lyra was right. Maybe there was more to these objects than met the eye. As the day unfolded, Lyra continued to adjust to the modern world, asking countless questions about everything she encountered. She marveled at the flickering light bulb hanging from the ceiling, touched the smooth surface of Thomas's phone with wonder, and listened intently as he explained how cars worked. But while she found some aspects of this new era fascinating, others troubled her deeply. What happened to the forests? She asked suddenly, pointing out the window toward the distant tree line. They feel diminished, fragile. Thomas hesitated, unsure how to respond. Well, people cut down trees for wood, farmland, cities, and it's complicated. Lyra frowned, her expression darkening. Complicated or careless? In my time, we lived in harmony with nature. We took only what we needed and gave back in equal measure. Now, she trailed off, shaking her head. It's no wonder the earth feels unbalanced. Her words struck a chord within Thomas. He had always cared about the environment, but hearing Lyra speak so passionately made him realize just how disconnected humanity had become from the natural world. It was unsettling to think that centuries of progress might have come at such a cost. Later that afternoon, Lyra asked to step outside again. This time, she wanted to explore the forest near Thomas's home, the same ancient woods where he had discovered the mysterious box. As they walked beneath the towering trees, Lyra seemed to come alive in a way Thomas hadn't seen before. She knelt beside patches of moss, ran her fingers along gnarled roots, and paused to listen to the faint rustle of leaves overhead. "The forest remembers me," she whispered, closing her eyes. "Even after all this time, it still holds traces of my energy." Thomas raised an eyebrow. "You mean, you've been here before?" "In a way," Lyra replied. "This land was sacred to the keepers. They performed rituals here, communed with the spirits of the earth. That's why the box was hidden nearby. It was meant to protect me until the time was right." Her explanation sent a chill down Thomas's spine. If the forest truly held some connection to Lyra's past, then perhaps it held answers too. Answers to questions he didn't even know how to ask yet. As they ventured deeper into the woods, Lyra suddenly stopped, her body stiffening. "Do you feel that?" she murmured, her voice tense. "Feel what?" Thomas asked, looking around nervously. At first glance, everything seemed normal. The wind rustling through the trees, birds chirping in the distance. But then he noticed something strange. The air felt heavier, charged with an almost electric energy. Lyra stepped forward cautiously, her glowing eyes scanning the surroundings. "Something, or someone, is watching us," she said quietly. "Stay close." Thomas obeyed without hesitation, his heart pounding in his chest. He had always thought of himself as brave, but standing in the shadowy forest with Lyra's warning ringing in his ears, he couldn't shake the feeling that danger lurked nearby. Just as they were about to turn back, a low growl echoed through the trees. From the underbrush emerged a large wolf, its fur matted and its eyes gleaming with unnatural intelligence. Thomas instinctively reached for a nearby stick, ready to defend himself, but Lyra raised a hand to stop him. "It's not hostile," she said firmly. "At least, not entirely." The wolf circled them slowly, sniffing the air. Then, to Thomas's astonishment, it approached Lyra and bowed its head, as though submitting to her authority. Lyra knelt down, placing a gentle hand on the creature's muzzle. "You're a guardian," she murmured. "A protector of this place." The wolf let out a soft whine before retreating into the shadows. Thomas stared after it, dumbfounded. What just happened?" "That wolf was no ordinary animal," Lyra explained as they resumed their walk. "It's a spirit bound to this forest, tasked with safeguarding its secrets. It sensed my presence and recognized me as one of the keepers chosen." Thomas shook his head in disbelief. "This is insane. Spirits? Wolves bowing to you? None of this makes any sense." Lyra chuckled softly. "Magic rarely does, at least not at first. But trust me, Thomas, the world is far more complex than you realize. What you call insane is simply part of a larger truth." Her calm demeanor helped ease Thomas's nerves, but doubts still lingered in his mind. How much of what she said could he actually believe? Was she truly a magical being from another time, or was there some rational explanation for everything? Despite his skepticism, he couldn't deny the evidence before him. The box, her awakening, the wolf. Something extraordinary was unfolding, and he was smack in the middle of it. When they returned to the workshop later that evening, Lyra decided it was time to reveal more about her powers. "You deserve to know what I'm capable of," she said, sitting cross-legged on the floor. "But remember, my abilities come with limitations and consequences." With that, she extended her hands toward a wilted potted plant sitting on a nearby shelf. Her eyes glowed brighter as she focused, and within moments the plant began to transform. Dead leaves turned green and vibrant, stems straightened, and tiny buds bloomed into colorful flowers. Thomas watched in awe, unable to tear his gaze away. "How are you doing that?" he breathed. "I draw energy from the earth," Lyra explained, "but it takes a toll on me. Every act of creation requires sacrifice." To demonstrate, she stood abruptly, but swayed slightly, her face pale. Thomas rushed to steady her. "Are you okay?" "I'll be fine," she assured him, though her voice was weaker than usual. "Using my powers drains me, especially now that I'm adjusting to this world. It's why the keepers sealed me away, to prevent others from forcing." Me to use my gifts recklessly. Thomas frowned, guilt washing over him. If using your powers hurts you, then maybe you shouldn't. No, Lyra interrupted firmly. My abilities aren't a curse, Thomas. They're a gift, one I must use wisely. But I can't do it alone. That's why I need your help. Her words caught him off guard. My help? What can I possibly do? You opened the box, Lyra reminded him. That means you're part of this now, whether you like it or not. Your role may not involve magic, but it's just as important. You bring knowledge, insight, and strength. Together, we can restore balance, not just to this forest, but to the entire world. Thomas swallowed hard, the weight of her words sinking in. He had always lived a solitary life, content to stay on the sidelines. But Lyra's arrival had changed everything. Whether he liked it or not, he was being pulled into a story far bigger than himself, a story that demanded courage, trust, and action. As night fell, Lyra retreated to her makeshift bed, leaving Thomas alone with his thoughts. He stared at the wooden box, now empty but still radiating mystery. What secrets did it hold? And what challenges lay ahead for him and Lyra? For the first time in years, Thomas felt truly alive. Scared, yes, but also exhilarated. Whatever the future held, one thing was certain: he couldn't turn back now. Over the next few days, Thomas found himself caught in a whirlwind of emotions. On one hand, Lyra's presence filled his life with a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. Her stories about magic, ancient rituals, and her role as a guardian of balance fascinated him. But on the other hand, doubt gnawed at the edges of his mind. Could he really trust her? Was she truly who she claimed to be? Or was there another explanation for everything that had happened? Thomas wasn't used to questioning reality. He prided himself on being rational, grounded in facts and logic. Yet here he was, living alongside someone who could make plants bloom with a touch of her hand and communicate with spirit-bound wolves. It was all so far-fetched, so impossible, that part of him wanted to dismiss it as some elaborate dream or hallucination. And yet, every time he looked at Lyra, saw the glow in her eyes, or witnessed her powers firsthand, he couldn't deny the truth staring him in the face. One evening, as they sat together in the workshop, Thomas decided to voice his concerns. Lyra, he began hesitantly, I believe you, I really do, but this is all so overwhelming. How am I supposed to wrap my head around something like this? Lyra set down the small wooden carving she'd been examining and turned to face him. Her expression softened, understanding flickering in her glowing eyes. I know it's difficult, Thomas, she said gently. You've spent your entire life relying on reason and evidence, but what I represent exists beyond those boundaries. Magic doesn't conform to rules, not the ones you're familiar with anyway. But how can I be sure? Thomas pressed, his voice tinged with frustration. How do I know you're not, I don't know, manipulating me somehow? Lyra didn't seem offended by his skepticism. Instead, she smiled faintly. Fair question. If our roles were reversed, I might ask the same thing. But let me show you something. A memory from my past. Perhaps then you'll understand. Before Thomas could respond, Lyra closed her eyes and raised her hands. The air around them grew still, charged with an almost electric energy. A soft hum filled the room, and suddenly, images began to form in the space between them. Ethereal, shimmering visions like scenes projected onto mist. Thomas watched in stunned silence as the memories unfolded before him. He saw Lyra centuries ago, standing in a lush forest surrounded by robed figures, the keepers. They chanted in a language he didn't understand, their voices rising and falling like waves. In the center of the clearing stood the wooden box, its carvings glowing faintly. One of the keepers placed a hand on Lyra's shoulder, speaking words of reassurance. Then, with tears streaming down her face, Lyra stepped into the box, allowing them to seal it shut. The vision faded, leaving Thomas breathless. That was real? He stammered. As real as anything else, Lyra replied. I showed you because I wanted you to see the truth, not just hear it. My story isn't meant to inspire fear or doubt. It's meant to remind us both of why we're here now, to restore what's been lost. Her words resonated deeply, easing some of the tension in Thomas's chest. For the first time, he allowed himself to fully consider the possibility that Lyra was telling the truth. That magic existed, that she was bound to a sacred duty, and that he had somehow become entangled in her destiny. But even as his doubts began to fade, new questions arose. What exactly did restoring balance mean, and what role was he expected to play in all of this? These thoughts weighed heavily on him as the days passed, but there was no time to dwell on them. Life with Lyra was anything but ordinary, and, soon enough, another challenge presented itself. Meanwhile, Lyra was struggling with her own challenges. Adjusting to the modern world proved more difficult than she had anticipated. While she marveled at inventions like electricity and automobiles, she also felt alienated by the coldness of technology. The bustling village, with its noisy streets and hurried inhabitants, overwhelmed her senses. People seemed disconnected, not just from nature but from each other. "It's strange," she confessed one afternoon as they walked through the market square. "In my time, communities thrived on cooperation and shared responsibility. Here everyone seems so isolated." Thomas nodded thoughtfully. "It's true. People are busy, focused on their own lives. We don't always take the time to connect anymore." Lyra sighed, her gaze drifting toward a group of children playing near a fountain. "Children still laugh the same way, though," she observed wistfully. "Their joy feels pure, untainted by the burdens of adulthood." Despite her struggles, Lyra made an effort to adapt. She learned how to use basic appliances, practiced speaking in contemporary terms, and even tried cooking, though her first attempt at making toast ended in charred bread in a smoke-filled kitchen. Through it all, Thomas remained patient, guiding her with gentle encouragement. Their bond deepened with each passing day, built on mutual respect and growing trust. Yet beneath the surface, cracks began to form. Lyra's powers, while impressive, came at a cost. Every time she used them, she grew weaker, requiring hours of rest to recover. Thomas noticed dark circles forming under her eyes and a slight tremor in her hands when she overexerted herself. Concerned, he urged her to take it easy, but Lyra refused to slow down. "I can't afford to rest," she insisted one evening after reviving a dying tree outside the workshop. "The imbalance is spreading faster than I anticipated. I need to act quickly." "Acting recklessly won't help anyone," Thomas countered, his tone firm. "If you push yourself too hard, you'll collapse, and then what? Who will protect the world if you're gone?" Lyra met his gaze, her eyes flashing with determination. "I'm aware of the risks, Thomas, but doing nothing is far more dangerous. You have to trust me." Her words struck a nerve. Trust. That elusive concept that had been hovering between them since the beginning. Thomas realized that while he was learning to accept Lyra's magical abilities, she too was grappling with uncertainty. Did she fully trust him, or was she simply using him as a means to an end? These unspoken doubts lingered in the air, creating a subtle tension neither of them could ignore. Yet despite their reservations, they continued working together, driven by a shared goal to uncover the secrets hidden within the carvings of the wooden box. Back in the workshop, Thomas pored over books and scrolls, searching for clues about the symbols etched into the box. Some of the designs resembled constellations, while others bore resemblance to ancient runes. He sketched diagrams, cross-referenced texts, and pieced together fragments of information, determined to decode their meaning. Lyra joined him whenever she could, offering insights based on her memories of the Keeper's teachings. Together, they discovered references to a forgotten temple buried deep within the forest, a place where the boundaries between realms were thinnest. According to legend, the temple served as a nexus point, connecting the human world to the spirit realm and the natural world. "If we can find the temple," Lyra explained, excitement coloring her voice, "we might be able to repair the damage done to the Earth's balance, but we'll need to tread carefully. Such places are often guarded by powerful forces. Thomas nodded, feeling a mix of anticipation and trepidation. The prospect of venturing into an ancient temple filled with unknown dangers was daunting, but he knew they didn't have a choice. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. As night fell, they prepared for the journey ahead. Supplies were gathered, maps studied, and plans made. But amidst the preparations, Thomas couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't alone. Shadows seemed to linger longer than usual, and faint whispers echoed through the trees outside. Something, or someone, was watching them. When he mentioned this to Lyra, her expression turned grave. "We're running out of time," she said, quietly. "The keepers may be long gone, but their legacy lives on. Others will come looking for me, seeking to exploit my powers. We must reach the temple before they do." Her warning sent a chill down Thomas's spine. Up until now, their adventure had felt like a distant fairy tale, removed from immediate danger. But Lyra's words reminded him that stakes were high, and getting higher with each passing moment. As they settled in for the night, Thomas stared at the ceiling, his mind racing. Tomorrow, they would step into the unknown, guided only by faith and determination. He glanced at Lyra, sleeping peacefully despite the weight of their mission. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he vowed to protect her, not just because she needed him, but because she had awakened something inside him, he thought, was lost forever: hope, and with hope came courage. The morning of their journey to the forgotten temple dawned cold and gray, with a heavy mist clinging to the forest like a shroud. Thomas and Lyra set out early, armed with little more than a map, some basic supplies, and the wooden box that had started it all. The air was thick with anticipation, each step they took deeper into the woods feeling heavier, as though the forest itself knew they were venturing toward something sacred and dangerous. As they walked, the usual sounds of nature seemed muted. Birds chirped less frequently, and even the rustling of leaves underfoot felt quieter, almost hesitant. Lyra moved with purpose, her glowing eyes scanning the surroundings as if she could sense the pull of the temple drawing them closer. Thomas stayed close by her side, his satchel slung over his shoulder and his lantern in hand, though the daylight made it unnecessary for now. He couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't alone, a prickling sensation at the back of his neck that grew stronger with every passing moment. "Do you feel that?" Lyra asked suddenly, stopping mid-step. Her voice was low, barely above a whisper. Thomas nodded. "Yeah, it's like someone's watching us." Lyra's gaze shifted to the shadows between the trees. "We're being followed," she said grimly. "I thought we might have more time before they found us." "Who?" Thomas asked, his heart beginning to race. "The keepers?" "No," Lyra replied, her tone darkening. "Remnants of them, or those who inherited their knowledge. People who still believe I should be controlled, used as a weapon rather than a protector." Before Thomas could respond, a sharp crack echoed through the forest, followed by the unmistakable sound of footsteps crunching on dead leaves. They exchanged a glance, both knowing instinctively that running wasn't an option. Whoever, or whatever, was following them would only pursue them further into the woods. Instead, they pressed on, quickening their pace while trying to remain quiet. After what felt like hours, the terrain began to change. The dense canopy overhead thinned, allowing shafts of pale sunlight to filter through. The ground became uneven, dotted with moss-covered stones and gnarled roots twisting out of the earth like skeletal fingers. Ahead, the outline of a crumbling structure emerged from the mist, a massive stone archway covered in ivy, its surface etched with carvings similar to those on the wooden box. "This is it," Lyra murmured, her voice filled with awe and trepidation. "The temple." Thomas stared at the ancient entrance, his breath catching in his throat. The carvings on the archway glowed faintly, pulsating with the same otherworldly energy he'd seen in Lyra's eyes. It was beautiful, yes, but also foreboding. Something about the place felt alive, as though the very walls were aware of their presence. Before they could step inside, a figure emerged from the shadows. Then another, and another. Within moments, they were surrounded by a group of hooded individuals, their faces obscured beneath dark cloaks. Each carried a staff topped with a crystal that shimmered ominously, casting eerie light across the clearing. One of the figures stepped forward, lowering their hood to reveal a weathered face with piercing blue eyes. "You shouldn't have come here," the man said, his voice calm but laced with menace. "The girl doesn't belong in this world, not anymore." Lyra stepped protectively in front of Thomas, her hands raised slightly as though ready to summon her powers. "You don't speak for the Keepers," she shot back, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. Their legacy was one of balance, not control. The man smirked, shaking his head. "Balance is a fragile thing, child. Left unchecked, your gifts will destroy everything you seek to protect. That's why we've been tasked with ensuring you fulfill your true purpose." "My purpose isn't yours to decide," Lyra snapped, her eyes glowing brighter. "And neither is my freedom." Thomas watched the exchange, his mind racing. These people clearly meant business, and judging by the crystals on their staves, they weren't ordinary humans. Magic crackled faintly around them, making the hair on his arms stand on end. He didn't know much about fighting magical forces, but he did know one thing. Standing idle wasn't an option. "Let her go," Thomas said firmly, stepping forward despite the fear gripping his chest. "She hasn't done anything wrong." The man turned his gaze to Thomas, studying him with a mix of curiosity and disdain. "Ah, the mortal who opened the box. Brave of you to involve yourself in matters beyond your understanding." "I may not understand everything," Thomas admitted, "but I know enough to see that you're wrong. Whatever you want with Lyra, it's not about protecting the world. It's about power." A flicker of anger crossed the man's face, but he quickly masked it. "Very well," he said coolly. "If you insist on interfering, then perhaps a demonstration is in order." With a wave of his hand, the man gestured to his companions. The air around them shimmered, and suddenly shadowy tendrils erupted from the ground, snaking toward Thomas and Lyra. Instinctively, Lyra thrust her hands outward, summoning a barrier of golden light that repelled the attack. The force of the collision sent shockwaves rippling through the clearing, knocking several of the cloaked figures off balance. "Run!" Lyra shouted, grabbing Thomas's arm and pulling him toward the temple entrance. They sprinted through the archway, the sound of pursuit echoing behind them. Inside, the air was cool and damp, the scent of earth and stone filling their lungs. Faint beams of light filtered through cracks in the ceiling, illuminating carvings along the walls that depicted scenes of nature and celestial bodies intertwined. At the center of the chamber stood a pedestal, atop which rested a crystal identical to the ones on the intruder's staves, but larger, radiating a soft, pulsating glow. "This is it," Lyra whispered, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and resolve. "The Heartstone. If we can activate it, we can restore the balance and seal the temple forever." "How do we do that?" Thomas asked, looking around nervously. The sounds of footsteps grew louder. Their pursuers were closing in. "You'll need to help me," Lyra said urgently. "Place your hands on the stone when I tell you to. Your connection to the box makes you a conduit. If we work together, we can amplify its power." Thomas hesitated, unsure if he was capable of such a thing. But seeing the determination in Lyra's eyes, he nodded. "Okay, let's do it." Lyra approached the pedestal, raising her hands as she channeled her energy into the Heartstone. The glow intensified, bathing the room in warm golden light. Just as the cloaked figures burst into the chamber, weapons drawn, Lyra called out, "Now, Thomas!" Without hesitation, Thomas placed his hands on the crystal. A surge of energy coursed through him, unlike anything he'd ever experienced. It was overwhelming, exhilarating, and terrifying all at once. Visions flashed before his eyes, images of forests thriving, rivers flowing freely, skies clear and bright. He felt connected to something vast and ancient, a force far greater than himself. The cloaked figures lunged forward, but the combined power of Lyra and Thomas created a blinding explosion of light. The temple shook violently, chunks of stone falling from the ceiling as the heartstone pulsed with energy. One by one, the intruders were forced back, their crystals shattering as the temple's defenses activated. When the tremor subsided, the chamber fell silent. The heartstone dimmed, its glow fading until it resembled an ordinary crystal once more. Lyra collapsed to her knees, exhausted but triumphant. Thomas knelt beside her, his own body trembling from the strain. "It's done," Lyra whispered, a weary smile spreading across her face. "The balance has been restored." Outside, the forest seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. Birds began singing again, and the oppressive weight in the air lifted. Though the journey had been perilous, they had succeeded, though neither of them knew what challenges might lie ahead. For now, they allowed themselves a moment of peace, grateful for the bond they had forged and the courage they had discovered within themselves.